What you're currently listening to is my 2010 Gibson Les Paul Standard. These days it's a pretty beastly guitar, but it wasn't always like that. Let's talk about why Gibson has a legitimate problem. Now, when I first started playing guitar, my idols, unsurprisingly, were James Hetfield and Kirk Hammett. I was one of the many millions of guitar players out there who wanted to be James Hetfield, and if I'm honest, still do. While Kirk's guitar solos were the thing that actually got me to pick up and start playing guitar, I always thought Hetfield had the cooler guitars, and yeah, still kind of do. Now, the two guitars that Hetfield used the most during the S&M concert was an Explorer and their big Iron Cross Les Paul. So when I decided I'd start playing guitar, I sort of tried to choose which one of those two I liked more. I always thought that the Explorer was too pointy and too metal for a pasty little nerd like me, so I gravitated towards the Les Paul, which I thought was a little bit more, I don't know, classy, I guess. It's hard to say it's classy when it's got a big old Iron Cross on it, but So from then on, I had a love of Les Pauls, and ever since then, been a golden retriever and Les Paul guy apparently. So my first guitar was actually this. This is a Yamaha AES 620. It's got a Seymour Duncan in the bridge and a Yamaha thing in the neck. This is my first guitar, still got it, still love it. These days, I have no idea if the mic picked that up. These days I've got it in open C, so I use this for my really down-tuned stuff or for those times that I want to pretend I'm Devin Townsend. But, I mean, obviously, an imitation Les Paul wasn't going to be good enough. So eventually when I turned 22 and started my career, I thought as a present for starting my career, I thought I would get myself an actual Gibson Les Paul. So after playing every single Les Paul I could find, I decided I would grab this one. Don't know if it was in focus enough, but long story short, you can tell it's a 2010 Gibson Les Paul Standard. And probably what you could tell from the start of this video, it was a total dog of a guitar. And that's a pretty big issue. We need to understand why Les Pauls are a big deal in the first place. Les Pauls are one of those mythical sort of guitar types. You've basically got the Stratocaster, you got the Les Paul, and you got the Flying V. Those are the three sort of electric guitars that everybody knows. They are strongly associated with guitar players like Slash, Jimmy Page, Zakk Wylde, Snowy White, John Fogerty, Gary Moore. But if we're honest, pretty much every single rock or metal guy out there has rocked a Les Paul at some point in time. I mean, even Iron Maiden, who are one of the most famous Strat bands out there, even they rock Les Pauls every now and then. They're famous for having this super thick but really sort of chirpy sound that just fills up all this space, but then has this very distinctive attack that just cuts through a mix. There's plenty of pick attack, but there's also this thick, liquidy mid-range, and a lot of legendary guitar solos have been recorded using Les Pauls. And look, even though I'm about to rip into Gibson Les Pauls, do want to stress that they are pretty much still my favorite guitars. I saw Paul McCartney's tour in Australia a couple of years ago, and he was rocking a Les Paul, and I gotta say, it was one of the best guitar sounds I've ever heard. Now, since they're such a famous guitar, they carry a really hefty price tag. In Australia, they can set you back about $5,000. This tends to make them a bit of a Ferrari guitar. Like the guitar that you're spending too much money on, but you're getting the absolute best that there is. So it's it's a Les Paul, I'm getting what it's worth. At least that's the idea. So here's a photo of me with my Les Paul when I first got it. You can see the grin on my face. I was psyched. It was a dream come true sort of moment, and I even emailed the serial number to Gibson to find out like what factory was it made in, when was it made, and as much information about that guitar that I could. And for a long time it was my pride and joy. But ultimately it's led to about 10 years of drama and disappointment. So let's go through it, shall we? Let's go through all the ways that that guitar has kind of killed my soul time and time again. Okay, so first issue is that Les Paul has had a surprising amount of pickups put into it. The neck pickup of the Les Paul I've always kept stock because I sort of argue that that's why you buy a Les Paul. You buy a Les Paul for that really thick, liquidy neck pickup sort of sound. So I never touched the neck pickup. But the bridge pickup has changed a lot. So I've had a bare knuckle crawler in there, I've had a Seymour Duncan JB, I've had a Seymour Duncan distortion in there, and eventually I settled on a bare knuckle ceramic nail bomb. So you can tell I wasn't exactly messing around with pickups, I was trying to find something pretty awesome. This is a guitar that's like really dazzling at first. But then once you get used to it, you realize that all those like little dazzly things are actually issues. This is a guitar that will really grab your ear, and you will sort of sit there when you're just playing it and be like, oh man, this will cut through a mix and sit perfectly in anything. Until you actually drop it in a mix. So that thick bottom end that Les Pauls are really well known for, this had a really thick bottom end, but it was also kind of hollow and just didn't stand out in a mix. It just sort of like dissipated the moment any other noise came into play. So like you could hear that bottom end when you were playing by yourself, but then it never translated into a band mix. So the guitar kind of always ended up sounding way thinner than it was supposed to. It also had like this really floaty and completely not authoritative mid-range that again would kind of just get stomped on by anything else in the mix. Despite changing pickups 100 times and all sorts of things I had done to it, the pick attack I could best describe from this guitar was that it was kind of tappy. It was more like somebody was tapping in your ear rather than somebody like picking a note, and it just never really sounded right in a mix. It also had this really sort of shrieky upper mid spike that, yeah, that cut through a mix, but never in a pleasant sort of way. And it was something that I tried to fix 1,000 times with like, you know, dynamic EQs and multi-band compressors and stuff like that. But it wasn't an errant frequency that was the shriek, it's something in the tone of the guitar itself that just wasn't right. So, I mean, there's problem number one, is that this guitar never really sounded right. So there's been other problems with this guitar as well. The electronics died twice. And yeah, look, I know I messed with the electronics a fair bit by having a lot of pickups put into it, but the electronics died, first of all, at the input jack. The input jack completely died once. So, I mean, that's got nothing to do with the pickups. And also the guitar pots died at one stage. I mean, this is exactly what you want from your $4,000 Ferrari guitar, right? Also, this was a guitar that just constantly needed setting up. Things were just always kind of moving and not quite staying where it should. So the action would always need tweaking, the truss rod would need a bit of a tweak every now and then. I would often take it to my tech and the tech would sort of go, look, none of it's wrong, but none of it's right either. Everything just sort of kept moving. It wasn't a stable guitar, which I think sort of suggests it was not a very well put together guitar. However, the most soul-crushing moment happened here. So, unlike me, I had ordered a new pedal and I was excited to check it out. So what I did was I plugged in the pedal and, you know, plugged into my amp and everything like that. Grabbed my Les Paul, plugged it in, went strum, and I noticed that everything was like really out of tune. I thought, that's weird. But at the same time, a Gibson being out of tune is not a terribly unusual thing. So, you know, stomped on my tuner, looking down and started tuning things up. I got things back into tune. I went strum again and things had automatically gone well out of tune again. And I thought, that's odd. So I looked up the neck and yeah, the headstock had broken off. And yeah, that kind of sucked. That was not a good day. This was a guitar that sat in a guitar stand its entire life that I had it. I gigged it a couple of times, but it never got a knock or anything like that. So yeah, just one day the headstock gave way. So I googled around and I found Jim and Merv Cargill down in Seaford, who advertised that they repair headstocks all the time. Gave them a ring, dropped my Les Paul off, like mildly panicked about it and everything like that. They kind of laughed and said that Gibson headstocks are the thing that keeps luthiers in business. Although if I'm honest, after that headstock break, the guitar was a bit dead to me, but we'll come back to that later. Now this will be the first point of contention for a lot of Gibson fanboys. They'll be like, nah mate, headstocks don't just go by themselves, must have had a knock somewhere. I can assure you this guitar was my pride and joy. It was always in a guitar stand. It never received a knock or anything like that. I absolutely babied this guitar. I can assure you it never received a knock. Now for the record, Cargill did an amazing job of the repair. When he handed the Les Paul back to me, he had done a full setup and everything like that, and he actually gave the guitar back to me playing way better than it ever did in its life. So after that, I just started taking all my guitars to Cargill of like, okay, here you go, set this one up. He gave it back to me. Yep, that plays amazing. Awesome, here's my next guitar. And I got him to set up all my guitars. To be honest, he's done all my guitar work since then. Now, a few months later, the plastic jack cover broke. Now, I mean, that's not a big deal, but again, this is meant to be like a Ferrari guitar. This is meant to be like the super expensive thing that's like absolutely perfect. And that's when things really started feeling off to me, because I started thinking, why does such an expensive guitar have so much plastic stuff bolted to it? Like, if this is like the best of the best, shouldn't it all be made out of the best materials instead of having like cheap, crappy plastic bolted to it? So I had to spend $5 to buy a new metal cover to replace the plastic jack on my super expensive Ferrari guitar. That doesn't make sense. Why did it not have a metal jack plate in the first place? Now it was about this time that I discovered fuzz pedals, so I've since had this guitar wired up a little bit differently. These days I have a master volume pot and a master tone pot rather than individual tone and volume pots. That's because when you're playing with fuzz, you kind of want to be really careful about how much gain you're feeding into them from your pickups. So, you know, it kind of sucked when playing with fuzz to switch from one pickup to the next and they would have completely different gain settings. So master volume works way better for me. But this is when I started to resent the placement of those pots. Like, why are they all the way down on the bottom? It's really hard to adjust. Well, it's not really hard, but it's way harder to adjust your volume while you're playing with those pots compared to, say, on a Strat or on my PRS. On my PRS and on my Strat, it's super easy. I can reach it with my pinky. With the Les Paul, you need to sort of move your hand away from the bridge, drop it down. Yeah, look, I know these are first world problems, but they are legitimate problems when you're trying to play. So, look, after 10 years and a million setups, repairs, rewirings, and everything like that, I can now honestly say that my 2010 Gibson Les Paul Standard is a fantastic guitar, but I don't care. Like, I would even go so far to say as it's an awesome guitar that plays and sounds better than when it was new, but I hate this guitar now. It's an awesome guitar that broke my heart 17,000 times in the process of becoming an awesome guitar. So as a result, I no longer have any desire whatsoever to play this instrument. Once I had this studio set up and had all my guitars up on the walls and stuff like that, I honestly think this guitar went like a year without being played, just because there was nothing about it that made me want to pick up and play it. And that's a shame because it's a legitimately great guitar now, but it was awful getting it to that point of being a great guitar. And that's the problem with Gibson. See, when you buy a Gibson, you're not just buying an instrument, you're buying into that legacy, you're buying into that history of buying this like legendary instrument that has been used by legendary musicians and on legendary recordings. How many more times can I use the word legendary in a sentence, right? You're joining the club of Les Paul players, and that comes with certain expectations. Like, I didn't buy my Les Paul until I felt like I was a good enough guitar player to deserve buying a Les Paul. Now, as I said, I went to every guitar store in my area and played like a dozen Les Pauls before I decided that that was the correct Les Paul. I mean, I was wrong. But that reputation kind of dulls your judgment a little bit. You're not as critical when playing these guitars because you can't escape that legacy, you can't escape that reputation that you're about to walk out of the store with a Ferrari. However, what I realized was that even though that Gibson Les Paul was about 4 times more expensive than any of my other guitars, it required the most amount of pickups, it required the most amount of work done to it, required more setups, and it's also the only guitar I've ever bought that needed a legitimate repair. That doesn't make any sense. But look, aside from the economics of the whole thing, I don't think enough has been said about how soul-crushing it legitimately is to have a guitar like that die on you. As I've said a few times, the mystique and legendary sort of reputation of Les Pauls is completely unavoidable. So, if you've bought a Les Paul, it's likely because those legendary recordings and those legendary players, they mean something to you. So then, when you buy into that, and you end up with something that's kind of crap, it's really soul-crushing. As a musician, it's actually legitimately kind of devastating. And what's even more soul-crushing is how easy all of these problems are for Gibson to fix. Other luthiers have told me that Gibson headstocks are the most common thing that they repair all the time. It's not just on Les Pauls, it's on SGs as well. Yeah, like, how are they still making guitars with headstocks that come off? And also, why is it okay to spend $5,000 on an instrument and then have plastic parts bolted to it that break? Especially when, like, my $1,000 PRS SE doesn't have any plastic parts on it. Like, it cost me $5 to replace a plastic part with something metal that wasn't going to break. Like, how does this make sense? And I mean, let's not forget that a Gibson Les Paul does not stay in tune, like, at all. That G string is never ever going to sit in tune. When I was recording the demos for this, I forgot that I was in the habit of playing a riff, tuning the guitar. Playing a riff, tuning a guitar. With none of my other guitars, I need to do that. With my other guitars, I tune them, I play a riff, and yeah, they stay in tune. Like, why are we buying these guitars that are thousands and thousands of dollars if they don't do the most basic requirement of staying in tune? I accepted it at the time because I didn't know better, but after buying other guitars, yeah, I know better, and it's no way near good enough. And look, even though personally I will never buy Gibson again, probably, like, I'm a gear nerd, so I mean, I don't like to rule it out, but I'm never going to buy a new Gibson again. But these are all issues that have been talked about for years that, I mean, Gibson should have fixed them by now. The Les Paul was invented in the 50s. You can tweak the design. It's been, what, 75 years? Come on, guys. Let's go. Let's fix a few things. Let's get a headstock that means that the strings stay in tune. Let's get a headstock that also stays attached to the guitar, shall we? Let's not bolt pieces of plastic crap onto our $5,000 guitars and be like, hey, that's great. Let's, make sure that the guitars all sound great when they leave the factory. These are not experiences that a customer who's paying that much money should have. If I don't have those experiences with any of my other like $1,000 guitars, it makes no sense for it to happen to a $5,000 guitar. Now, if you're in the market for a Gibson Les Paul, I get it, because I still love Les Pauls. I have a recommendation for you instead of buying a Gibson. Let me show you what that is. Say hello to my Gibson solution. This is my Gibson Les Paul copy. It was made by James Cargill, the amazing tech and luthier that I mentioned earlier in my video. It was handmade to my recommendations and to my specifications, and it is perfect in every way.
And it was perfect! Perfect in every way!
Now, earlier on, I mentioned that Cargill was the guy who repaired my Les Paul when the headstock broke off for no apparent reason. It's fine, I'm over it. I'm not over it. And then how I got him to set up all my guitars. So Cargill and I, we've been doing a lot of business together. So there was one day when I was down at Cargill's getting my Gibson fixed again for whatever reason, that he mentioned that he builds guitars. And that had my interest, because this man sets up guitars exactly how I like them to play. Like, I buy a guitar, I like it, and then I send it to Cargill, and it comes back and I'm like, oh man, I bought something awesome. So if this man sets up guitars exactly how I like them, I was pretty interested when he told me that he builds guitars. Because if he can set up a guitar that he didn't build to play exactly as I want, imagine what he could do with something that he built himself. Now, ever since I found Cargill, I have recommended him to all of my guitar playing buddies that if you need anything done in your guitar, take it to Cargill. However, and I still do. End of the day, Cargill's my man. Cargill's a legend. However, I do have a friend who took a guitar to Cargill and got it set up, and he hated the setup. He was like, this is unplayable. I had to play on it just to see, because I mean, hey, we all stuff it up every now and then. And to be honest, I love the setup that Cargill put on that guitar. And that's the thing about Cargill. Cargill will set up a guitar so that it plays right to him. He's not going to set it up as to what the manual says it should be set up for. And that was a really important point to me, because that means that Cargill likes guitars to play the same way that I do. And that's a very big recommendation that I can say to everyone, is shop around for your guitar techs. Don't just take it to like your local store and be like, yeah, that plays fine, and roll with it. It is actually worthwhile taking it to a few different techs and getting it set up. You're probably going to get the odd setup that you're just like, Jesus, what is this? But when you find your guy who sets up your guitar to play exactly as you want it to, that's your guy, and hold on to him. And yeah, for me, as I said, it's Cargill. Cargill is 1000% my guy. So yeah, when my guy who sets up all my guitars tells me that he can build one for me, yeah, that has my interest. So what I did was I took all of my guitars down to Cargill's, and we talked about what I liked about each one, and sort of Frankensteined a Les Paul copy that would play like my dream guitar. So here's what we sort of ended up with. First of all, we agreed that we should have a headstock that stays on. Easy thing, you thought Gibson would manage that, but apparently they don't. So got that out the way first of all, headstock will stay on. Tick. Cool. Moving on. Next, I said that I wanted a guitar that stayed in tune, unlike my Les Paul. He said that he finds PRS headstocks to be some of the most tuning stable, I guess is the way we'll phrase it. So, I mean, since this is a one-off, yeah, I went for a PRS headstock on there to make sure that it stays in tune. Since I like playing with fuzz pedals, as I've said, I wanted a master volume and a master tone, but I've gone for more of a Strat layout rather than a PRS layout. PRS layout just doesn't quite feel right, so I've gone for more of a Strat layout with the controls, because that way I can reach the volume knob with my fingers while I'm playing on the strings, then I don't have to move my hand completely away from the bridge. I liked the string spacing of my Explorer better than my Gibson, so we've gone for the slightly wider string spacing. It's like barely noticeable, but I do notice it. I mean, it's my guitar, obviously I'm going to notice it. And in terms of fretboard radius, I've actually gone for a little bit curvier than a Gibson, and actually one step curvier than a PRS. I'm not much of a shredder. I mean, I do a lot of lead stuff, but I'm much more of a, fast blues guy than I am a shredder. So, yeah, I don't need a flat thing that I can do Van Halen tapping on and stuff like that. So, yeah, I find a curved fretboard to be much more comfortable to play on. Strats are a little bit too curvy, but as I said, we went somewhere between PRS and Strat, and yeah, we've ended up with something fantastic. Finally, I do like how Gibsons have those deep frets, so we went for the Gibson sort of fret wire on this. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, even though I hate Gibson Les Pauls, I still love Gibson Les Pauls. I didn't want a guitar that was like completely different to a Gibson Les Paul. The aim of the game was to get a fixed Gibson Les Paul, to fix all the errors that, Gibson have persisted with for like 70 odd years or so. So that's what we were going for. We were going for a Gibson that stays in tune and everything like that, but something that still felt and played like a Les Paul. Felt and played like a Les Paul with the headstock still on. Another thing which I think might be a me thing rather than a everybody else thing, I actually prefer a bit of a flatter top than the big bulbous carve that a Les Paul have. I think that's more of a me thing than anybody else, but I find I get more support on my arm with a flatter top than what I do a curved top. So yeah, it's still got a curved top on my Les Paul, but it's just a little bit flatter than what the Gibson is. So ultimately, it's a Les Paul body shape with a Gibson neck thickness, PRS neck shape, slightly curvier fretboard, PRS headstock so it stays in tune and so that the headstock stays on, and a Strat control setup. And well, there it is. That's my Les Paul. I've decided to call it Sylvia for fairly obvious reasons. Also because I have a slight crush on the producer Sylvia Massey, but I mean, who wouldn't? She's amazing. And look, I know a Silverburst Les Paul is associated with Adam Jones from Tool, and I do love Tool. Tool are by far one of my top 10 bands. I do want to stress that this wasn't made to be like an Adam Jones clone. It's just that I think Silverburst guitars in general look cooler. When Brent Hines put out that Silverburst Flying V, I nearly bought one just because I thought it looked so awesome, even though I hate Vs. But how cool did that look? So yeah, I will acknowledge that there is somewhat of a Tool connection there. It's just not like the primary focus. Now, Cargill has nailed absolutely every aspect about this guitar. I can't speak highly enough about this guitar. It plays absolutely perfectly. It feels exactly spot on in my hands. And one thing I'm a little bit fussy about is how the volume pots feel when you roll the volume off. Sometimes they can be really quick or really slow or just all sorts. The volume pot on this thing is absolutely perfect, so I would like to think that Cargill spent some time trying to find a volume pot with a good sweep on it, and he did. He's nailed it. It's absolutely brilliant. What's more is that since he built this guitar himself, he's able to give it a little bit better of a setup than what he can something else off the shelf. Now, since Cargill sets up guitars exactly the way I like them to be, that means that the setup on that Les Paul is just to die for. It feels perfect to me. But this is a guitar now that plays so well that I don't have to think about what I'm playing. I'm just playing, and what I want to happen is kind of what happens automatically, just because it fits me so perfectly. Now, the interesting thing about this is that you might play this guitar and you might hate it with an unholy passion, and that's totally fine. This guitar wasn't built for you. This guitar was built for me. This guitar was built to my specifications, my likes, my dislikes about guitars. All the things I like about guitar playing is in that guitar. So it would make perfect sense for me that if I handed you this guitar, you might play it and go, oh my god, what the hell is this? And that's 100% fine. It wasn't made for you, it was made for me. And in my eyes, it's perfect in every way. In terms of pickups, we went through a few pickups, but what we ultimately decided on was a Seymour Duncan JB in the bridge, because that's the greatest pickup ever invented. And we went for a Lola Imperial in the neck. Now, it's been real interesting because in the process of making this video, I've had to play my Gibson again, which has been the first time I played it in about a year and a half. I think probably even longer. And honestly, it was a little bit like hanging out with an ex-girlfriend, because in your head, you're sort of like, no, we had some great times together. This will be fine. This is going to go well. We had some great times. Don't write it off just because you had a bad experience. Go for it anyway. You know, make the best of it. And then you actually get there and you're like, oh yeah, that's why this didn't work. Like, I mean, obviously I'm biased now towards my Cargill and biased against the Gibson. But I restrung both guitars. I polished both guitars. I was as fair as I possibly could. And genuinely, playing the Gibson feels like playing an Epiphone when compared to the Cargill. With the Cargill, I'm much more accurate, I play better, it feels better, and at the end of the day, the Cargill is the guitar that I want to play. The Gibson is a guitar that I no longer want to play. That criteria alone means that Sylvia wins. So there we have it. That was my journey to get the Les Paul of my dreams. I have babbled on this video for longer than probably any of my other videos. I haven't edited it yet, but I'm guessing it's going to be the longest video I've made. But based on the extent of this babbling, I'm pretty certain you can tell how disappointed in the Gibson I was, and simultaneously how much I love Sylvia. But aside from having a very public brag about how amazing my guitar that was made for me is, I honestly recommend everybody doing this. In my incredibly humble opinion that I've been babbling on about now, I think if you spend more than, say, $1,500 on a guitar, you're spending too much money. As I've mentioned earlier, all of my other guitars are like $1,000. I think the PRS hollow body was my most expensive. I think that was $1,500, I think. And to me that makes sense because a hollow body is a lot more difficult to make than like a solid body. So yeah, a bit of leeway there, I can see that. But all of them have needed like 1, maybe 2 setups. All of them have great pickups in them. All of them sound great, play great, they're faultless. The Gibson was the one that needed all the work. So if you're spending more than $1,500, I get it because shiny things exist, and as musicians, we like the shiny things. So I totally get why you want to spend more than that because there's something shiny there. However, in all honesty, if you're going to spend more than $1,500 on a guitar, my biggest recommendation to you is, first of all, if possible, give Cargill a ring. Go see Cargill and get him to build a guitar for you because you're going to get something amazing. But if you can't do that, because hey, this is YouTube and I know you may be in Zimbabwe, but if you can't do that, find a luthier near you who can build a guitar exactly to your specifications. You're going to get something that you love, you're going to get something that's perfect for you, and it's going to cost you about the same, but you're not giving money to Gibson. Because that's the thing, Sylvia cost me less money than what a brand new Gibson will cost. And it's a hand-built guitar to my specifications. It's far as I'm concerned, compared to that, Sylvia is a bargain. So my recommendation for everybody is, instead of buying something off the shelf for like $5,000, that's probably okay and probably good. You might get lucky and get something amazing. Instead, find a luthier who can build a guitar that you want and give that guy that hard-earned money. You're doing something better for your community, and you're going to get something that you like more and means so much more to you. On top of that, you're getting a guitar that nobody else has. That's cool. Like, if you blindfold me, I could tell you, that's Sylvia. Well, I mean, obviously I'd have to play it first, but you get what I mean? Like, if I can instantly tell Sylvia she feels completely different compared to any other guitar I've ever played. And that's because it was made for me. And that's why I say to you all, if you're interested in spending a large amount of money on a guitar, instead of going to your stores and playing every single Gibson that exists and hopefully maybe getting a good one, go find a luthier who can build you exactly what you want and give that guy the money. Hopefully it's Cargill, but if it's not, it's cool. You know, either way, find someone who can build the guitar of your dreams for the same amount of money, because that's what you should be getting for that sort of money, and that's not what Gibson give you. On top of that, let's be honest, Gibson's behavior as a company is pretty terrible. The amount of companies that they sue for no good reason, and also what they did to Ryan Bruce, like, guys, that just sucks. Don't do that to some of your best supporters, yeah? So, I mean, Gibson these days aren't really the respectable, reputable brand that they should be. Why would you give them money? So if you've made it all this way, thank you very much. I appreciate all your time and listening to me. All the best, and seriously, go check out your local craftsmen, because some of them are going to be absolute legends. Have a good one.